So 1 Corinthians chapter 14 is the chapter that Paul solely dedicates to the issue of tongues, to the issue of speaking in tongues. And not just that, he dedicates it to the issue of speaking in tongues in an assembly, in a church, and speaking in tongues in private. You have to look closely to see those two things, those two different things. So, but for the most part, Paul talks about speaking in tongues in an assembly, and he wasn't concerned about people speaking in tongues at all. It was not a question. Speaking in tongue itself is not an issue in church, as far as Paul's writing was concerned. What he was concerned about was doing it decently, doing it in order, and doing it in such a way that everybody is blessed. So he will say something like, pray that if you speak in tongues, then you should interpret. Because when you speak in tongues, nobody understands what you're saying. So how can somebody say amen if you pray in tongues? How can somebody say, if you're blessing somebody, how can they say, okay, amen? How can they understand? How can you teach anybody in tongues when they don't understand what you're saying? So, but that tongues was an integral part of the New Testament church in the New Testament, in the Bible, is not a question at all. For example, Paul says in 1 Corinthians, somewhere there in 1 Corinthians 14, Paul said, so when you come together, every one of you, not some of you, every one of you, you have a doctrine, you have a message, you have a word, a psalm, a song, you have a tongue. So the tongue aspect of it was an integral part of their service, of their church service, of their worship. He said somebody has a song, somebody has a doctrine or a teaching, a Bible lesson, somebody has a psalm, somebody has a word, a tongue, a message in tongue. And then he says, let everything be done properly and in order, decently and in order. That was all he was concerned about. In verse 39 of the same 1 Corinthians 14, Paul said, covet to prophesy and do not forbid to speak in tongues. Do not forbid to speak in tongues. All he was really concerned about, as far as tongues is concerned, if you're going to speak in a tongue in a congregation, get ready, be prepared to interpret it. Why? Because if you speak in tongues, nobody understands what you're saying. Yes. But if you are able to interpret it, then somebody can be blessed. Okay? And then in 1 Corinthians, in verse 14 and 14, 1 Corinthians 14, verse 14 and 15, rather, I said 14 and 14. In 14 and 15, Paul said, if I pray in an unknown tongue, my spirit prayeth, my understanding is unfruitful. What will I do? I will pray in the spirit. I will also pray in my understanding. In other words, I will pray in tongues. I will also pray in a language that I understand, English or Yoruba or something else, or Swahili or French. All right. So the issue was not about tongues at all in the church. The issue was tongues interpretation done decently and in order. Amen.